Abdullahi Saad Abdulkadir, representing Ningiwarji Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, my respected colleagues, I am from the new oil-producing state, that is Bauchi State. Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by making an observation, not a critique. I believe an important law of this nature, it needs more than this number of days to properly dwell on it, to prepare, because I for one, I know that I just got copies of the speech and the breakdown of the budget yesterday. So I believe it is not enough time for us to digest it and make robust and qualitative contributions. So it's just an observation. And secondly, on behalf of the members sitting on this row, I want to appeal to Mr. Speaker that next time when you start from the far end, the following day you should start from this row. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, I will want
So I should be thinking of where did I start yesterday, where did I start today?
Yes.
Honorable Ningi. See how now, in terms of time, now you spent 2 minutes. You have not even started your debate.
That is an observation, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead. No, but noted. Yeah. Good observation.
Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the federal government on the key assumptions of this bill. Because if we look at the exchange rate, if we look at the crude oil price and the volume of production, I think it is within an acceptable limit. Given the fact that we are facing a very uncertain period, the economies of the world is in a very vulnerable state due to the coronavirus pandemic and its implication. So it is always good to stay on the side of caution. So it is good to have a conservative estimate. I thumbs up the federal government for that. And also the 29% expenditure that is dedicated to the capital aspect of our budget is also commendable in the face of growing public expenditure, in the face of growing overhead costs, growing personnel costs, but still the government is able to retain 29% for our capital expenditure. It is commendable. We'll have loved to get up to 50% or more. But looking at the realities of time, I think the government has done something that is really commendable, and we should appreciate the government for that and support it. Mr. Speaker, having said this, I have some worries. Number one, the issue of debt, rising debt profile. If you look at the budget, we have over 4 trillion that has been set aside that will be used to service the debt of the country, and even borrowings to fund the budget itself. Mr. Speaker, it is on this note that I want to urge my colleagues to queue behind you in your recent crusade for the call of cancellation of certain debt owed by African countries. I believe if we can get that, it is going to help us a lot, and we are going to see the impact in our budget and in our spending, and because it is going to free up some resources that will be diverted to use to fund critical projects that we need for overall national development. So, Mr. Speaker, we also commend you, and we are going to stand behind you to see that we get this budget cancellation. And not only budget cancellation, Mr. Speaker, there is the question of budget restructuring. Even the domestic debt that we have, especially for bond owners and what have you, I think there is the need for us to sit down with this, with our creditors, to see how we can restructure this budget so that we'll have more breathing space and have more resources that can be deployed for national development. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the government, I want to commend the President, I want to commend you, Mr. Speaker. If you will remember when the external borrowing plan was before us, majority of members from the Northeast and Southeast, we protested against it because of exclusion of the eastern corridor of the rail of this country. And I'm happy that now the government has approved that project in line with what we passed in approving the external borrowing plan, because we put a proviso, a special clause and you were responsible for that. The people of Northeast and Southeast are grateful to you, and we are grateful to this House. However, I will not finish without drawing the attention, because I happen to be a member of one of the committees when we were doing our budget defense last year. The Honorable Minister of Transportation was quoted to have said that the issue of constructing standard gauge rail lines is very expensive. So he was mooting an idea of constructing normal gauge lines for the other corridors. Mr. Speaker, in all humility and with due respect, the Eastern Corridor is also supposed to be a standard gauge line and not a normal gauge line. I think it is very important we raise this point so that the people of that region will not be given a kind of second-class treatment. Mr. Speaker, in paragraph 72 of the speech of Mr. President, he said that water resources projects are going to be executed in the Northeast. It is on this note, Mr. Speaker, I presented a motion calling on the federal government to reactivate the Kafin Dam in Bauchi State. So there couldn't be a better opportunity than now, when the federal government has decided to construct irrigation dams in the northeastern part of the country, as encapsulated in the speech of the President through paragraph 72. I want to urge this House to consider provision of adequate funds for the construction of Kafin Dam in Bauchi State. If that dam is realized, a lot of things are going to happen to the benefit of this country. There will be job creation, there will be power generation, there will be food security, and what have you. So, Mr. Speaker and Honorable House, I want to urge us to please support this noble project of Kafin Dam in Bauchi State. Mr. Speaker, my honorable colleagues, I also want to commend the government. In the light of the coronavirus pandemic, government came up with a lot of interventionist policies. For example, through the central bank, a lot of funds, a lot of money was set aside, and it was granted as a low-interest loans to the real sector of the economy. And 9% was the interest rate. In the President's speech, he said the central bank is working towards reducing that interest rate to 5%. That is cutting it down to 5%. I believe this is commendable, but we are still not resting on our arse. We are asking the government to do more, because this source of cheap funds is going to go a long way in cushioning the effect, the harsh effect of the coronavirus pandemic. It is on this note that we are calling on the federal government of Nigeria through the central bank to look at the possibility of cutting down further the interest rate from 5% to maximum of 2%. I believe this will go a long way in protecting jobs and in ensuring macroeconomic stability in the country. And also, Mr. Speaker, let me stop at this juncture by advising the Honorable House that we should look at the issue of the Fiscal Responsibility Act very critically. This year, it is 3.64% above the threshold. I mean, the threshold says that you cannot have a debt of more than 3% of your GDP, while in the plans, in the budget, it is 3.64. Last year, it was 3.57 in the revised budget. So I want to urge this House that we should look at the possibility of amending that particular aspect of this Fiscal Responsibility Act. Even if we are not going to increase it to 5%, we should put a proviso that any time government wants to go beyond the 3% threshold, it must be backed by a joint resolution of the two houses of the National Assembly. That way we'll have some flexibility to allow government to respond to issues that they have no control. For example, what happened this year and why this debt is going to that is perhaps due to the coronavirus pandemic. And the government cannot stand and say it will just be fixated to what is in the law, because it is not going to solve the problems at hand. So if we have a leeway, if we have a kind of flexibility that we can play around, I think it's going to help this kind of situations. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to contribute.